Hello, my name is Saanvi Bhat, and today I'll elaborate upon the notable risk factors of Alzheimer's disease and their implications on current and future treatments. Before I start, I would like to thank my mentor, Sabine Nettles, for her continuous guidance through the completion of this project. During the COVID-19 pandemic, my grandfather was diagnosed with dementia. Through phone screens, I watched how his condition progressed, unable to physically do anything. As a student, I'm currently interested as well as looking forward to pursue further studies in biology, molecular biology, and neuroscience. So this project has been an interesting way to learn about the disease afflicting him, as well as countless other elderly people in the world. This brings me to our agenda of today's presentation. Today, we'll understand what occurs in the brain of a patient with Alzheimer's disease. We'll then examine the prominent genetic risk factors and comorbidities implicated in the disease's development. We'll then look at various treatments that are available, and then we'll put the information together. Where do we go from here? First, let's discuss what Alzheimer's disease actually entails. It's a progressive neurological condition that results in cognitive decline and functional impairment for affected individuals. While it was the sixth leading cause of death in the US, the true number of deaths associated with this disease is likely higher due to undiagnosed or misdiagnosed cases. The reason for this underreporting stems from the fact that symptoms of Alzheimer's can coincide with other neurodegenerative diseases. It is caused by the abnormal buildup of two misfolded proteins in the brain, beta amyloid and tau. Together, they inhibit neuronal activity, causing the brain to atrophy or essentially shrink. The beta amyloid protein is formed from the breakdown of a larger protein called the amyloid precursor protein. In a brain with Alzheimer's disease, they clump together to form neuritic plaques that ultimately disrupt cell function by preventing neurons from synapsing with each other, leading to the death of neuronal cells. Normally, tau molecules bind to microtubules in the brain to support and stabilize the structure of healthy neurons, but in patients with Alzheimer's disease, abnormal chemical changes can cause tau molecules to detach from their microtubules and stick to other tau molecules, forming threads that eventually join to form neurofibrillary tangles that inside neurons, which block their transport systems and interfere with the synaptic communication between them. Now, let's move on to discussing the genetic factors implicated in Alzheimer's disease. One such gene is known as ApoE, and it encodes a protein that helps carry cholesterol and other types of fat in the bloodstream. Studies suggest that problems with the brain cell's ability to process fats or lipids may play a key role in Alzheimer's and related diseases. Additionally, this gene comes in several different alleles, which have different implications on this disease. One such variant is the ApoE4 allele, and it increases the risk for Alzheimer's and is associated with an earlier age of disease onset in certain populations. However, while inheriting the ApoE4 gene allele increases a person's risk of Alzheimer's, some people with the ApoE4 allele never develop the disease. A study conducted by Anthony Griswold and other researchers published in 2021 found that the cells in the brains of patients with European genetic ancestry had almost 40% more ApoE4 transcripts than samples from individuals with African genetic ancestry. Currently, the mechanism that leads to this difference in ApoE4 expression is unknown, but scientists speculate that it is caused by DNA methylation or enhancer repressor activity, two processes that regulate gene expression. Interestingly, the ApoE2 allele may provide some protection as if Alzheimer's occurs in a person with the ApoE2 allele, it typically develops later in life than it would with someone with the ApoE4 gene. Another gene that is considered a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is the amyloid precursor protein. It encodes the amyloid precursor protein found in many tissues and organs, including the brain, which eventually break down into beta amyloid proteins with the ability to form into amyloid plaques. Individuals with Down syndrome, which is trisomy 21, have a higher risk of developing early onset Alzheimer's as they have another copy of this gene. Other genes that are implicated in Alzheimer's include PSEN1 and PSEN2. They are on chromosomes 14 and 1, respectively, and encode a subunit of the gamma secretase complex that processes amyloid precursor proteins and cuts them into smaller peptides, like beta amyloid. Mutations on these genes can alter how APP is processed, increasing the formation of beta amyloid proteins that form into plaques. Next, we'll move on to comorbidities in individuals with Alzheimer's disease reported to contribute to disease pathology. One such disease is diabetes. It's a chronic disease where either the pancreas is unable to produce enough insulin, a hormone that regulates the amount of glucose in the bloodstream, as seen in type 1 diabetes, or the body cannot effectively utilize the insulin it produces, as seen in type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, in particular, is associated with an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease in a variety of populations. Patients who were pre-diabetic displayed an increased risk for dementia, suggesting that even early alterations in the glucose metabolism triggers neurodegeneration. Despite the numerous linkages between type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's, the mechanism connecting the two for the set is yet to be fully understood, and many theories include impaired glucose metabolism and vascular abnormalities. Another comorbidity that is present in Alzheimer's patients is cardiovascular disease, specifically deep brain strokes and coronary heart disease. Studies suggest that coronary heart disease, which is the most common type of heart disease, is a risk factor for cognitive impairment and dementia with atherosclerosis or the buildup of cholesterol within arteries as the underlying cause linking these two diseases together. Autopsies taken in 1,000 subjects show that more than 77% of Alzheimer's patients had atherosclerosis in a subset of arteries in the brain. Furthermore, this positive association was stronger in subjects with both atherosclerosis and the ApoE4 genotype. With this in mind, we'll move on to discussing current treatment and therapy options used to improve or relieve symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. At the moment, there are two types of treatment approved by the FDA: drugs that change the progression of the disease or drugs that mitigate symptoms. Many of the drugs that change the progression of Alzheimer's work by targeting beta amyloid plaques in the brain. Other treatment options for Alzheimer's lessen or stabilize symptoms by targeting certain chemical messengers between the nerve cells. For example, cholinesterase inhibitors are drugs that stop the actions of the enzyme acetylcholinesterase, which breaks down the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Patients with Alzheimer's disease have low levels of acetylcholine in their brain due to the damage of nerve cells that use acetylcholine. Thus, these medications rectify this issue. Another treatment that targets certain chemical messengers between nerve cells are NMDA receptor antagonists. Normally, the neurotransmitter glutamate binds to the NMDA receptors, allowing calcium to enter the neuron. In Alzheimer's disease, there are elevated levels of glutamate, causing neurons to become overwhelmed with calcium, further damaging them. By regulating the activity of glutamate, these treatments are prescribed to aid with cognitive abilities. While the list of approved treatments to counteract Alzheimer's disease is small, there are many clinical trials underway to find new and better medications. However, there is a high failure rate overall, and many prove ineffective as they don't target the early pathology of Alzheimer's. Other novel treatments are based on the idea that diseases with common dysregulated pathways have similar therapeutic targets, and the anti-diabetic medication metformin is currently being investigated as a potential therapy for Alzheimer's disease, though current data is limited. Overall, as we've discussed today, there are many risk factors associated with Alzheimer's disease, ranging from certain genes and their alleles that may pose an increased risk to comorbidities affected by emerging biological pathways. Unfortunately, this disease is one that can only be properly diagnosed postmortem due to the specific characteristics within it. While a multitude of biomarker tests have been developed for earlier diagnoses, a major challenge for implementing them is that they are either highly invasive or expensive and labor-intensive, making them impractical for regular use within clinics. However, with further development like mildly invasive or non-invasive procedures like electroencephalograms or EEGs, Alzheimer's can potentially be diagnosed within the earlier stages, increasing the effectiveness of the treatment. Furthermore, the ApoE genotype, PSEN1 and PSEN2, as well as APP, can detect 45 to 90% of early Alzheimer's disease patients, and changes in gene expression specific to Alzheimer's disease are being noted and explored to create other tests that are either minimally or non-invasive to detect Alzheimer's disease in its early stages. Another observation is that the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease can vary depending on one's ethnic makeup, due to the specific expression or repression of genes in the particular ethnic groups, as was seen conducted by Anthony Griswold and his colleagues in 2021. However, a large issue is that minority groups have historically been underrepresented within healthcare, resulting in smaller sample sizes to collect data and analyze from. This also adds another unknown, as the underrepresented data could lead to the development of treatments that are ineffective for a large number of populations with Alzheimer's disease due to differences in genetic and epigenetic makeup. Thus, people from all ancestral backgrounds should be encouraged to partake in both clinical and genetic research in order to study the particular causes of this disease and develop more effective treatments. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Thank you, Saanvi. Cute dog, by the way. Lab? You got a
Uh,
lab?
he's an English cream golden retriever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was a cute dog. Um, Curious about a couple things.
Mhm.
So one thing that you mentioned is it's the sixth largest cause of death, but you said there's probably larger because of misdiagnoses. Was any of the research like, did it specify, what the estimated number of deaths are, or the estimated number of people that actually suffer from Alzheimer's that are not included in that statistic?
So it's estimated to be the third leading cause of death in the United States, and that's just because many of the symptoms, such as memory loss, are do coincide with other neurodegenerative diseases. And you can only diagnose Alzheimer's after death because the specific criteria for Alzheimer's is having those beta amyloid plaques and the neurofibrillary tangles in the brain, which makes it really hard to find treatments for, essentially, or to
Yeah.
detect it really early, which is, I think, re what people are researching right now for, like, they're mainly focusing on that type of research because in order to make treatments, you need to be able to diagnose the disease.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because you even said, like diabetes could be, but there's more studies that need to take place. Or someone even posted a question like recent news about researchers looking into how viruses like herpes or something can
Hmm.
cause Alzheimer's, which is interesting. Someone else asked a question. What was the most challenging part of your research?
I think when I started this project, I really did want to do some kind of wet lab. I really enjoy wet labs. A lot of, but I eventually decided on this topic because it is a really pressing issue, and I do have family history related to it. But I think for me, the most challenging part of part of finding information was the fact that obviously some articles are behind paywalls, but also there isn't a lot of new research. One of the medications that was um one medication for treating Alzheimer's was approved recently, like last June or July. And it's really interesting to note that this is all happening in real time. Improvements are happening re in real time. And it's interesting to be a part, just to be a part of it right now.
Yeah, and it would be so fascinating because it does need more research, right? A sixth leading cause
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
death, and anyone who's had a family member go through it will tell
Mhm.
you it's a very tough disease,
Exactly.
and so to be able to have people looking out for it. I also found some things that were interesting too that you said. Um, the 80 APDE4
Yeah.
seemed to indicate that race does play a factor, but you did indicate at the end that there needs to be more studies multiracially,
Yeah.
but that did seem like a high propensity of Europeans versus people of African descent. Is that right?
Yeah, but this is research done. Obviously, the study was published in 2021, but historically, if you think about a lot of studies regarding minorities in healthcare, it's underrepresented, just like how researchers in healthcare that are minority groups are underrepresented.
Yeah.
That's what's specifically drawing me to this type of field, especially neurodegenerative research, is because I do want to improve this parity.
Yeah.
So
And yeah.
it was interesting because when I was doing my research, the ApoE4 allele just kept popping up in there. Some interestingly for some side effects for medications, um if you have the ApoE4 genotype, there is a side effect for medications that treat Alzheimer's called ARIA. If you have the ApoE4 genotype, then you are more likely to experience those side effects.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's
Yeah.
all connected, but
Yeah.
it's still really interesting to figure out. And
Yeah, it was a pleasure to listen to. I mean, obviously you could tell you did your work. And somebody did ask a question, but you already answered it, so I'll answer it for the group. She is planning to pursue this in college, right? You said that at the beginning, right? That's
yeah.
it's a personal experience, but also something that you plan to
Mhm.
continue to pursue. And it sounds like you have a strong foundational knowledge. It was great to
Yeah.
great to listen to it. Thanks, Sambi.